Do you remember this blade that I forged? It was an amazing blade that sold for $10,000, but my customer got a hold of me and said that he wants another one, but this time he wants it to be light, nimble, and fast. So today that's exactly what we're gonna make. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today is episode 1 of turning this design into a usable, functional, lightweight blade. Today we're going to make the Damascus billet according to the design, and we're going to draw it out into a usable bar stock. So let's get to it. Before you get upset at the temperature, all we're doing right now is bringing it up just enough so that it's malleable, but it's still below that oxidation point. So we'll squish out any of those gaps, flux it, bring it up a little bit higher, squish it one more time so there's no gaps in there, and then flux it again, bring it all the way up to temperature, and do that first forge run. Okay, so that 20 layer billet is drawn out. Now we need to cut it in 3 places, stack it again, which will triple the layers, and then draw it out one more time, cut it in half, fold it again, which will give us 120 layers total. This part is pretty tricky because though I do love my 12-ton press, it's a little bit underpowered for this, but someday I'll be able to afford an upgrade, but not yet. So there's a lot of monkeying around to try to keep it from forging cold shuts in, which at one point you'll see it fish lips on both ends, and so I gotta cut those off, but at some point I'll upgrade to a press that can handle some bigger billets. Okay, so now let's talk about this pattern and why we're going to include this piece. What we have here is a center core billet that I'm making in order to accomplish the lightning storm style of pattern that I'm going for. We have 2 pieces of 15N20 on either side, and then a center core of 1095 doubled up. When you put 2 pieces of the same kind together, that's called the Hata technique. And the reason we're doing that is to increase the thickness of the individual layers. Here's why. When you draw out your billet, you cut and stack it to double the layer count, and then you continue, and therefore when you get enough layers you can manipulate it however you want it. So what we're doing with this blade is a little bit different. We're going to cut our billet into stacks, 2 separate stacks, and combine them into 120 layers, and in the center we're going to put this. So that what that does is it causes a nice clean border that we can then work with. If we took this pattern and then drew it out, it would look a little something like this. You would have your Damascus jackets, which is a poorly rendered version of that, with a strong stripe here of the 15N20, and then a very dark 1095 edge. But what we're going to do is a little bit different. We're doubling up that 15 in 20 to give it more mass to draw it out by hammering it. Now normally you wouldn't want to really distort that pattern so much, but because we're going for a storm theme, that's exactly what we want to do. So when we have the billet like this, and we hammer in those bevels really aggressively, we stretch those bevels out. So you have your Damascus jackets, and then you have your 15 and 20 that's being drastically stretched out. And because it's so thick, because we're using the Hada technique, it stretches it out even more aggressively, which is exactly what we did with that storm blade that I showed you earlier. So what's going to happen then is we're going to have our final look with a bevel here with a really strong pattern, and then our bevels are going to be kind of like this, also with a really strong pattern, and then our Damascus jackets completed with some fullers. So in order to accomplish this, we need to add this piece, draw it out into a usable billet, and then hammer out that details with a hammer. Okay, so at this point, the billet is nice and solid. We have 120 layers with technically 3 extra layers because of the Hada technique in the middle. And we're ready to draw it out into a blade now. We have it super thick, so we have plenty of room to manipulate it and draw it out to the specifications that we wanted, like we were saying, to make that pattern nice and dramatic. But honestly, this is just the beginning. Thanks for watching episode 1. Next episode, hopefully next Monday, we're going to include the next portion, which is finishing stretching out that billet, hammering out the profile, grinding it, and then getting it heat treated. So subscribe. Stay tuned for next time.